Live from Toledo, 13 Action News starts now.
Hello everybody, welcome to this digital exclusive. I am Josh Krupp. He is Sean Haggerty, and he is not in a Lenawee County courtroom today. Getting ready for closing statements tomorrow in the murder trial of Dale Warner. You've been in the courtroom every day up until now. Why is there no court today, and when can we expect things to pick back up?
Yeah, we're waiting for closing arguments, which are going to happen tomorrow. And what they wanted to do is they give the attorneys an extra day of preparation. Yesterday, the last witnesses came on, and we heard from all of them. The defense put on 3 witnesses, went just about 2 hours. It was very quick. And we thought maybe there might be some closings that happened yesterday, but they decided to give the attorneys the extra time. And of course, we're thinking about Dee Warner in this case. Disappeared in April of 2021. If you're not familiar with the story and how we got here, her kids come to see her for Sunday morning breakfast, again in April 2021. They come to her home. This is in Lenawee County, and she's nowhere to be found. They knew she had had a tumultuous marriage, and sometimes she would go to stay with other family members, but to not find her, and then when they started talking to other family members and nobody knew where she was, that's when they started to believe that there was a problem. They looked all over. They asked her husband, Dale Warner, where she was. His story was that they had had an argument the night before, that she had had some issues with coworkers before that. The argument happens the night before. She talks about wanting to sell businesses, potentially go through a divorce. She falls asleep in the living room. He falls asleep in the house. He wakes up to go farming that day, says he sees her sleeping in the living room, goes out to farm, and then he comes back, and then she's gone. And he has no real explanation on what happened to her. That brings us a search that went for many, many months, years. And eventually her body was found in a tank in August of 2024. It was a fertilizer tank, and I'm glad you brought it up. So this is the actual tank that she is found in. And what investigators have been telling us through the trial for the last couple of weeks, there's a non-factory weld there on tank 34. And what the prosecutors are alleging is that Dale Warner cut this tank, put Dee Warner's body inside, resealed it with that non-factory weld, repainted it, put stickers on it, and then eventually it ended up in a barn on another one of their properties. And that is what investigators found in 2024 when they were thinking about trying to look at this case differently. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But this tank really is the entire case. How did they get to it? Finding her inside. Now, they had already charged him and were able to come up with a murder charge against Dale Warner before the tank was found. This is inside of a
separate portion of the barn.
But then when they found the tank in 2024, it just changed the entire case. And so here we are now in 2026. Both sides have put their cases together. And what the prosecution is saying in their case is they're connecting all of the dots. They had a tumultuous marriage. She was talking about not only divorce, but selling the business. They had a lot of businesses together. Trucking, farming. I mean, to understand the kind of the operation that they ran, at one point they lost between $15 and $20 million on a vegetable farm. So this was a large operation that they were running. And what the prosecution is saying is all of that was just part of what led up to that night in April of 2021 when they say Dee Warner was killed. They're, of course, alleging that it was done by Dale Warner. There's a picture once again that is 52-year-old Dee Warner. Her children have testified in this case, talking about how their mother would never leave. And this is kind of the key in when it originally started that Dee had just disappeared. But they said Dee would never leave without her cell phone, without her makeup, without her go bag, and they had a 9-year-old daughter together. In total, there are 9 kids between the two of them. They had a 9-year-old daughter at that point. They said that if Dee went anywhere, if she stayed at a son's house, if she stayed at her brother-in-law or brother's place, she would always take her daughter with her. The daughter that night had stayed at a family friend's house, and when Dee disappeared, the daughter was with family friends. So if the story was that Dee disappeared, she did not take the 9-year-old with her. And that was a big key to a lot of the family members. We have a little bit of Dale here. The state police take over the investigation in 2022. He's questioned by the state police about what they think, what Dale thinks might have happened to her.
This is inside of a separate portion of the barn, taken on that same date at that same location on Paragon Road.
Did you make observations on this tank?
Yes, initially it stood out because all of the other tanks were outside and or in the open portion of the barns by one another. However, this tank was by itself in this area.
Okay. Did you make any other observations?
Yes. On the in this image, what would be the back or the left-hand side of the tank, there was a non-factory weld visible from the outside.
I will find her. I will find her actually. She's in Jamaica, or she's in Mexico. The reason I say she's in Jamaica, and when we're down there, she was fascinated with it. She was always off with it. What would you call it? Person that's in charge of the resort that gives you all the information, can get you anything you want while you're there, take you wherever. And she's always fascinated. When you're in Jamaica with the resort, so you look up on the hill. There's all these mansions way up on the mountain. Where are those up there? I want to go up there. That's all the drug cartels. That's all the people that you don't want to go up there. She's fascinated with that stuff. She's there. Here to you. You tell my wife she can't do something, she's going to prove you wrong. She's going to go there, she's going to do it.
So, Sean, when did this interview that we just saw there happen?
So we're at the end of 2022. You recall she disappears in April of 21. When the state police take over this investigation, the two investigators, you can kind of see the right there, that's the state police. They wanted to rehash things. They wanted to figure out where they are. They get the case from the Lenawee County Sheriff's Office, and they start to do their own digging. And they're asking him what he thinks about that. And you're really getting from the investigators and listening to this trial that they don't believe Mexico. They don't believe Jamaica. They don't know where she is at this point. But those two stories are not making sense. And again, the kids said it over and over again, the cell phone. They say she would never leave anywhere without the cell phone. So for her to have no communication, because at that point, we're at the end of 22, 18 months of no communication. She has said nothing to this, what would be a now 10-year-old at home, and not corresponding with any of the other kids. No credit cards, no debit card transactions, no passport activity. At one point, Dale even comes up with the story and the assertion that you can go to Florida and you can get a $10 to $20 boat ride to Mexico and Jamaica, and that's probably where she went.
They have also, the prosecution has tried to say and lay out the fact that Dale is methodical and that Dale plans things out. And how much of that was the detail-oriented person that Dale is, that that's something that I had heard a few times when I tuned in, was them trying to paint him as somebody who thinks about all of this stuff, who would have stories prepared for a situation.
Well,
like
and the resources too, because the non-factory weld we were just telling you about, he has all of that welding equipment inside his barn and inside the different facilities there. So if he needed to do cutting, if he needed to do welding, it was all available to him. One witness a couple of days ago said Dale didn't do that much welding. We had somebody yesterday who worked on the facility, brought up for the defense team, said that yes, Dale would weld things if need to be done, different things around the trucking business, around the tanks. So the ability and the wherewithal were there to do it. Could he cut a tank? Yes. Could he weld a tank? Yes. Did he do that kind of stuff? Sometimes. And I think that's really what the prosecution was getting at there, of the wherewithal. And then the tank is found on a piece of their property in 2024. So he had the resources to put it there, and he did farming. He had all of that around. So I think that's really the point of what they were talking about with the preparedness for him.
So police start poking around. They get various search warrants over a various period of time, because this search lasted for months. It wasn't she went missing and then a lot of time went by without having her body. So what kind of search warrants were executed while they were searching for her?
Well, let's talk about the two different police searches, because we'll start with the Lenawee County Sheriff's Office. In 2021, when she disappears and this call comes in, the Lenawee County Sheriff's Office starts to handle it. You've heard from testimony that family members were pretty frustrated with the Lenawee County Sheriff's Office. We'll get to the lead detective in a little bit. But then in 2022, the case is turned over to the state police. The family starts to feel more confident about that. You start to see that investigation done there. The state police really start to execute more and more search warrants, doing more and more digging, thinking about the next steps of what Dale may have done or what the person may have done who committed this. One thing that the state police brought up in their searches and when they were going back, there was a Google search. I'm going to paraphrase it here. It was what to do with a 1,000-gallon tank. Now, this was information that was taken off of his iPad, and as investigators from the state police tell us, they started to think about that. What does that mean? You're talking about disposing of a tank. What to do with it? What would that mean? And what the state police told us in their testimony was that their thought was that the tank was buried. That's why they did digging. We were out there a couple of times, especially in 2023. The thought was that the tank is underground. So we need to make our searches go underground. We need to dig. That's where we need to look. So it brings us to 2024, when it was described that kind of a light bulb went off. What if the tank and the welding are still a thing, but it's not below? It's above ground. And that's where I start to see that. And if we can play it here, we have one of the police detectives talking, and actually he pretty much apologized to the family in court the other day, saying that he wished he had thought more about above ground than below ground as this was happening.
But you said you were only looking for things underground.
It's a mistake I'm not proud of. I was convinced it was buried, and that's where I was looking.
And
I'm not proud of that, Mandy.
He was pretty straightforward.
Humility. It really felt like humility in the courtroom, and you don't see that often of somebody saying, I had an idea for months, and it turned out to not be the right idea. I did end up having the right idea, and then it turns into this. And of course, it's a tragedy when the body's found, but it does give the family some closure, and then it starts to give them the clues to go forward with the case. We'll go back in time a little bit. When the Lenawee County Sheriff's Office had the case, I told you that the family was pretty frustrated with the way it was going. So Kevin Greca is the lead detective for the Sheriff's Office, and his name has come up a lot. You might recall about a year or so ago there was an arrest warrant out for him because he had gone into Ohio and there were subpoenas for him, and we never were quite sure why there was such angst, why they needed to get him back, and why there was such worry with him. So now as the case has developed, he didn't testify for the whole beginning of the case. He came in very late to the case. There were even some court hearings weeks before this even started when he even discussed invoking the Fifth Amendment privilege of not incriminating himself. So we were all trying to figure out what exactly that meant. The theory about the welding, I want you to play this soundbite from the state police. The theory about the welding was never shared with the Lenawee County Sheriff's Office by the state police early on because of distrust. So let's play that and we'll talk more about that.
Did you notify Kevin Greca that you believed that welding was involved?
No.
Why not?
Kind of going back to what I described as kind of the awkwardness when I'm at the dining table with Mr. Warner. It's not my investigation. I'm just making recommendations on what I've seen from their investigation. So I wasn't entirely sure it would be appropriate for me to air that type of opinion. And separately, we were very conscious of the fact that somehow information was being leaked from the sheriff's department. So I wasn't totally sure who I could trust there, to be honest with you.
Is he saying information's being leaked to the family, to the media? Who is on the receiving end of the leak?
Well, I think the thought was it was going to the family, then coming to the media. You rarely hear, I don't know who I could trust from law enforcement talking about another law enforcement entity. So that brings in a whole nother layer of this case that I don't think any of us really understood, but has been fleshed out in the last couple of days, that when the state police took over and they really started to give it their own look, there was not a lot of let's call the sheriff's office and see what they have. It was more do their own thing. And then the kitchen table thing that was mentioned was that the state police wanted to start gathering cell phones and iPads and start dumping them, finding out what was inside of them. And there was question on who would give the cell phone, who wouldn't give their cell phone. And that was the awkwardness of the meeting, was they weren't sure who they should ask. If this one said they didn't want to do it, because there weren't a lot of search warrants for the phones at this point, who was going to voluntarily give it up? How are they going to approach that? How would they discuss who's already been talked with, and how do you have another conversation with that? So again, another layer, but now here we are in court. They've worked through all of those. They've gotten through all of the issues that they had to, and now we have this trial. We saw a lot of body cam in the last couple of days. These are some of the early searches that had happened, and there were times Dale would give consent to be on his property. There were other times he was revoking the consent. And that, I think, you could see in the body cams that the sheriff's office was taking that. They would go get some search warrants, and the state police had a lot of questions about that. Why are we saying no to searches? When do we need search warrants? What does that look like?
I have a couple of those body cam videos here. Do you have a preference of which one we showcase next?
No, go ahead and show some of them here, and I can kind of walk through, because hours and hours of body cam video.
A lot.
And what happened too is that the state police went back and watched all of these videos, because they didn't want to just take what the reports were saying from the sheriff's office. So they went back and looked through some of these. Go ahead and bring one up, and we'll kind of walk through what some of the things are. So this is the second search 2 days after she has disappeared. The sheriff's office earlier in the day was kicked off. They were going to bring cadavers, dogs, and they were going to bring drones. This is the second search when they come back. What's really key about this, Josh, and it caused some consternation, is that the sheriff's office that is speaking with them, the lead detective, Greca, is on the phone in this video giving Dale Warner a 20-minute heads up that the dogs are on the way. And this is a real key, because what we saw in some other video is that Dale is not home at the time. He comes back, and in surveillance video that's on the property, he's moving a tank with a front end loader throughout the property. And there are a lot of people that are worried what was in that tank and that front end loader. No one can say it for sure, and the prosecution's kind of trying to put the pieces together. Was Dee's body in that tank when he's moving it right in front of those investigators? Here's some more video of inside the barns. This is the day after Dee was last seen. And what the prosecution is saying is this is all this movement you're seeing Dale doing. He's going, this is right here, this is a good clip here. He's going to get things that will help to cut a tank and do some welding, is what the prosecutors are alleging at this point. And also what they're saying is that this would not be some of his typical operations. Is that the mask and the gloves there? That might be the mask and the gloves in his hands there. Because he did a lot of spraying of fields with fertilizer, so those kind of things would be expected. Again, this is movement on the property itself. What the prosecution doesn't have video of the crime, doesn't have a video of the body being taken around the property, but what they're doing with these clips is they're showing Dale's movement, they're showing the movement of the people that are on the property and putting things together. This is one of the searches that had happened pretty early on, and there was some concern Dale had brought up about the dogs from Michigan State Police going into one of the barns. It's called a spray barn. And what he was saying was that the chemicals that are on the ground, they'll bother the dogs. And what the state police were saying was that Dale didn't dictate where they would go. The state police, again, this is really early on, this is like 2 or 3 days in, they were listening to the investigator from the sheriff's office. And if the sheriff's office told them to go in the barn, they would. The sheriff's office did not tell them to go into the barn. So again, that is probably part of the consternation from the family over the years. Because April 21, she disappears. August in 2024, she's found. 3 years, no sign of Dee Warner. And when you were listening to the testimony, the family members really never bought the Mexico thing. They never really bought the Jamaica thing. But there were probably people that held out hope that maybe she had run away with someone else. It did come up in testimony she had had an extramarital affair. and it had ended well before her death, but that had come up. Dale had testified or had told them in some of the interviews with police that he believed she had a secret phone. The phone was never recovered, and no number was ever brought into testimony that the phone even existed. But and yeah, once again, you're looking at some of the movements of Dale. This is the day after she was last spotted alive, and the prosecutors are walking through his movements. What's in his hands? Why does he have that stuff? Would he normally have those kind of things? And what they're presenting to the jury is that this is abnormal for him to be doing these things. And on top of the fact that his wife is missing at this point. I said earlier that she did go to other places on her own. She would, for example, go to her son's place. They had a lake house. She would go there. She'd go to her brother's place. So what Dale was telling the investigators was, yeah, my wife leaves. This happens. We have fights. There's not physical fights, but we have arguments. My wife leaves. That's what happened here. And when the kids can't make any contact with her, the 9-year-old is still with a family friend, can't get a hold of her on the phone. Some of her stuff is gone. That's when it really just didn't make a lot of sense to the kids, and that's when their antenna went up and continued on. And it continued for years until 2024, when it was not the ending, of course, they wanted, but it at least gave them some sort of closure. So let's talk about Dale's defense team. What did they put on? They put on 3 witnesses. I mean, it was quick, 2 hours.
The prosecution's list was fairly long, and they didn't even go through their whole list,
It did not. Just behind the scenes a little bit, we were expecting this trial could have gone another 3 to 4 weeks. I mean,
wow.
that was what was on the schedule. The defense brought up Dale's ex-wife. They said that she testified that, yes, they had gotten a divorce. He had had a nagging cough, and then she left the stand. We had a coworker come on to the stand. He was the one I was saying that yes, Dale did weld. And then Dee's brother came on the stand, Greg Hardy. And I mentioned this last night, and you with your reporting as well. Greg Hardy kind of became a de facto family spokesperson over the years. We've seen a lot of Greg Hardy. And what the defense was trying to get out of him was that he knew farming, he knew how to work around tanks and stuff. And there was a little bit of some back and forth. We even, in some of our reporting over the years, have been told that the brother, Greg, was the one that directed the Michigan State Police to the tank when it was found in August in 2024. There's even some clips of him saying that in documentaries online. And it was admitted in court yesterday that that was not the case. He said that he did not do that. So you're starting to see the defense try to maybe poke some holes in or try to discuss him as part of the case. Because you don't normally have the victim's brother as a defense witness. Normally it would be a prosecution witness, but he was called by the defense. And the defense has asked questions about the brother. Every couple of witnesses, they drop in what do you know about Greg? Did you do this with Greg? Or how does Greg into that? So I guess not terribly surprising now that we've heard the entire pitch by the defense that he was brought up and brought into the case. And that was it. Those witnesses were it. And so we're getting to closing arguments. 16 persons on the jury now. Whittle it down to 12 for deliberations. And time-wise, I guess best guess, they start at 9 a.m. tomorrow. They got some evidence things to go through. Closings maybe an hour or so each. If I were to make a guess, I'd say after lunch, probably the jury gets the case. And then I'm not big on predicting anything in any way, shape, or form. I'm not big on predicting whether a short deliberation is good for this person, a long deliberation is bad for that side. We'll just kind of see where it goes. But yeah, I mean, what's now, March? Coming
March
up on
4th.
5 years. 5 years since she was last seen alive. April 24th, last seen alive. So yeah, this will be what we assume in the next couple of days will be the culmination of all of it.
What is the direction from the court on how much of a heads up we'll get before the verdict is delivered for the viewers who are watching?
Telling us 30 minutes is what they're going to give us. 30 minutes morning. We have a text chain going when we're going to be that. We'll be there anyway.
Sure.
We've been streaming virtually every minute of this case so far, and we're going to continue doing that tomorrow. And 13abc.com, as you well know, has so much of the testimony, all different pieces cut up. If you want to listen to, there was a jail phone call. We didn't even get into that yet. There was a jail phone call the day after the tank was found. Dale's son calls Dale in jail, and they talk about it. Tank 34. Dale kind of brings it up. Well, which one was it? And that kind of stuff. If you want to hear that call, that's at 13abc.com. So many different pieces of this trial are cut up there right now if people want to go back and see that. There's been a lot of interest in it. A lot of interest in not only the disappearance, the search, but now this kind of culmination of all of it. So we have that posted. So 9 a.m. tomorrow, which would be Thursday, is when we'll go over some evidence issues. And I think they'll go right into closing after that. I don't think we'll have any big long break or anything. Get right into the closing arguments. Maybe each side takes an hour or so. Who knows what they have planned? They haven't really given us that time schedule. But yeah, my best guess would be after lunch.
So the earliest we could have a verdict is tomorrow, but it could go 4 days and days.
Yeah, I would guess that the jury is going to get the case tomorrow. I don't see any major delays where the closings would be pushed back. I think the weather's going to be fine, so I don't anticipate anything about that. So I think it's safe to say the earliest we see a verdict is tomorrow, Thursday.
Well, Sean will be back in the courtroom for us tomorrow. We'll be live streaming the closing arguments tomorrow, Thursday, wherever you're watching this. You can come right back here tomorrow morning to watch the closing arguments. And if that wasn't a good enough recap for you, hopefully you'll be able to get caught up to speed on the trial with those closing arguments while they'll lay out their cases all over again. Any final thoughts before we let you go?
Wild case, really a wild case. I mean, we certainly have missing people, and we certainly have murder investigations, but the everything that happened in between, we have distrust between law enforcement, we have the tank, we have this back and forth here in the trial now, and just kind of every element of this case has been a twist after a twist after a twist.
And a lot of those twists were happening before we had the body. We had to go to court.
Sure.
The family went to court to declare her legally dead in all of this before they had her body.
Well, and what you're getting at is the civil side. And you and I, we don't even touch that, but there was an entire civil side of declaring her dead from a civil perspective, going through assets, divvying up money, what happens to the daughter. So that was an entire other side that had happened. And this, of course, is before they find the body. So making the declaration that she was declared dead. Then on the criminal side, they charge him in 2023. Again, the body's not found. So we have a preliminary exam in court in Lenawee County, and it is found that there is enough evidence to go forward in circuit court with a murder charge. Again, no body. So we're in that upper court, and then the body is found. So that changes the entire dynamic of everything. So yes, it absolutely has had just about every dynamic that you can think of in one of these court cases. And now we see what the end of it is. No predictions whatsoever, but let's just see how this plays out, and we'll see if by tomorrow we have an answer.
All right, well, we'll see you back here tomorrow for the closing arguments in the murder trial of Dale Warner. Thanks for watching this 13 Action News special report. His name is Sean Haggerty. Mine is Josh Krupp. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday.